John, Happy New Year. Welcome back to Crowdsource the Truth. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm well. Happy New Year, Jason. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. I was trying to make a kind of a casual evaluation of who has the more aggressive social engineers. It's currently a tie between you and David Hawkins. These guys just won't give up, and they have got...
Really?
Yeah, a lot of really juvenile tactics. It's unbelievable, but I think that's part of the way that they try to hide what they're doing. There's, well, anyway, we don't have to go into that, but you've prepared a pretty interesting show for us today. What do we want to talk about first here in our standard YouTube pre-show, and also just 30 minutes from now when we transition over to our sponsor-exclusive show? We're both on Patreon and Subscribestar now. People can go to patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or subscribestar.com for either of those subheadings and sponsor the show, subscribe to view the sponsor-exclusive content, and keep what we're doing sustainable throughout 2020. What have you got for us tonight, John?
Well, what we're going to be taking a look at the bottom of the hour at 5:30 Eastern is some evidence that is in the FIT report. So it's LVMPD official evidence, and it's been in front of us for over 2 years, right? So we've had this evidence from the crime scene, I guess, from the moment the initial FIT report was published. And although the evidence is in the photograph, it's not mentioned. And it's not mentioned by the LVMPD, and it's not mentioned by the FBI. But it's clearly visible. And we're going to take a much closer look at this evidence at 5:30, and the question that we're going to try and ask is this evidence corroborating any other aspects of the case? Is it consistent with other aspects of other evidence? Is this a surprise? Is this evidence something we would expect to see, or is this evidence something that is somewhat a shock to find? And so we're going to take a closer look at that at 5:30. In the meantime, I wanted to talk a little bit about intent. And we've scratched on the surface of intent in the past, and how evidence can be an indication of intent, right? So one of the things that we've talked about in previous shows was the fact that in the FIT report, there's no mention of eye protection for Stephen Paddock. Right. There's no shooting glasses, and if you're shooting at night, you're wearing clear shooting glasses. They're not that different from what you would buy like at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, right, as far as to protect your eyes if you're working on a project or something. So you would wear clear shooting glasses if you were shooting at night. But there's no mention of anything like that in the room. There's also no mention of hearing protection. And there's just simply no way that people are going to fire again and again. It's one of the interesting things about TV and the movies. If on TV and in the movies, every time anybody fired a weapon, they took out their hearing protection, it would just ruin the vibe. But the truth is, if you're firing a gun without hearing protection,
you'd go deaf.
You basically just damaged your hearing. Yeah. You just don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do, you rattle off a couple rounds with no hearing protection, you really damaged your hearing. So you just don't do it. And 1,000 rounds with no hearing protection is absurd. And nobody uses toilet paper or tissue paper. That's also absurd. Certainly no one who came this prepared, supposedly, to do damage. You come prepared. So when we look at this evidence and we look at the intent, the question becomes, what was he intending to do? If he's not intending to fire these weapons because he doesn't have eye protection and ear protection, everybody seems to be jumping to the conclusions that he's selling these weapons.
Right.
And I'm wondering if he was. Right? A lot of people have also said this looks like a Fast and Furious. And I see a lot of that kind of comment in other places on other YouTube channels where people talk about, was this guy doing, he was working with the FBI or the CIA and he's connected to this other plane that crashed in Yorba Linda, and all these guys are running guns for the CIA and all this other stuff. And again, it sounds great and it would make a great movie, but it doesn't hold up. And the reason it doesn't hold up is when the CIA or any of these other agencies whose letters that we don't even know, if they're doing an operation like that, they're not using civilian stuff. They're not using stuff that you buy at Walmart. They're not using stuff that you buy at Dick's Sporting Goods.
Blue hoses and things like that? Pool noodles?
No. I'm talking about the stuff on the weapons. So, in particular, if it's a federal agency, they have access to real machine guns. These are not machine guns, right? Now, what we hear going on during the attack, those are real machine guns. And just about every veteran who has heard it says it sounds like an M249 SAW or that type of weapon, a belt-fed weapon. But we don't see any belt-fed weapons in the room. So there begins some of the cognitive dissonance. But the net of this is, let's go with this concept for a moment, hypothetically, that Stephen Paddock really was working for the CIA or working for the FBI, doing some kind of gun running thing, right? Well, if that was the case, wouldn't the guns that he was selling, A, be sort of all the same brand and model, number one, and then B, wouldn't they be real machine guns? These are semi-automatic weapons that are chambered in a civilian caliber, which is .223, not .556 NATO. .556 NATO is military. .223 is civilian. These are all chambered in .223. Right, so these are civilian weapons with civilian accessible accessories on them. And then we get into this whole bump stock thing. And again, the bump stock was designed to simulate the machine gun. Why would the CIA be running guns with bump stocks on them that cost $99?
Well, I don't know.
They have access to real machine guns. Who wants to buy a bump stock equipped gun when you can get real machine guns, and why? So again, this is where the evidence doesn't support this gun running type of concept that this guy was working for the CIA, working for the FBI, and running guns. Not based on the evidence, not based on the fact that he's got a bunch of bump stock equipped AR-15s chambered in .223. That's not consistent with gun running with the CIA. So in other words, when we were doing the Fast and Furious program, those guns didn't have bump stocks on them. That's not what we're doing. So bump stocks are used to simulate the machine gun rate of fire with a regular off-the-shelf AR-15. And so now we get back to intent. We look at this room, we look at the scene, there's a million guns all over the place, right? 24 guns. But maybe more importantly is there's 5,000 rounds of ammunition in the room. That is just an unbelievable amount of ammunition to the left.
You're saying.
Right, correct. And if you look to the left of the pole there, where the pillar is, to the left of the pillar, so those are stacks of ammunition that went unused, and each one of those has 100 rounds in those. Those are surefire 100-round magazines, and these are rare. You just don't see these. Nobody uses that, and the reason is 100 rounds of ammunition is about $100. First of all,
Robert B. says wrong. Both calibers are available.
Both calibers are available where and what? Under what circumstances?
I don't know. That's what he said. Real machine guns cost over $10K. Never mind the permits. Whoever was shooting was using a bump stock. You can hear it in the cadence of the gunfire. I challenge anyone to listen, is what he says.
Okay. So, all right. So whether, yes, you can buy a 5.56 gun, that's not the point. The point is these guns in this room are 223. That's a civilian weapon. Our government wouldn't be trafficking in civilian weapons with civilian bump stocks. That's the point. And if we're doing a gun deal, we're not selling 24 guns. So this just doesn't look like a federally backed gun deal. All right. So we're not questioning whether 5.56 is available to civilians. That's not the question. So whoever brought that up, their comprehension is flawed. The issue here is that these weapons in the room, as specified by the LVMPD, are 223 weapons. The casings that are found are 223 casings supposedly in the room. Right. So that is the issue. Yes, the bore is the same. The case length is the same. But everybody says it's an M249 Bravo. So Phantom F4G, exactly right. Everybody who's in the military says we're hearing an M249. But what we see in the room are bump stock equipped weapons. Right. And so it's just not indicative of that type of a transaction. So now the question is, all right, so let's pull the lens back a second and let's look at what was in the garage. First of all, when the sheriff came on, the sheriff comes on TV at 1:30 in the morning and says, we're looking for 2 vehicles. How does Stephen Paddock, who's quote unquote acting alone, have 2 vehicles at Mandalay Bay?
Good point.
How does one do that? All right. So immediately at 1:30 in the morning, they know that they're looking for 2 vehicles, but one of the vehicles is a minivan. Okay.
Yep.
So we've got the minivan. Now the minivan's got women's clothing in it, right? That's the bag from Angle with the women's clothing, and that looks like a nice cashmere throw or something like that that's sitting on the ground, right? So we've heard in other video footage that there are 3 women who were registered to the room with Stephen Paddock.
Angle or Angel? One of those.
I don't know I don't know. I would pronounce that Angle, but somebody who's sweeter than me might say Angel. To me, it says Angle. I don't know.
Yeah.
Tomato. I don't know. We'll have to ask somebody who knows in Vegas. But the net of it is, all right, so this is indication that he had a female with him. But what is Stephen Paddock doing with a minivan? And what else was in the minivan? What else is in the minivan? What did the police tell us they found in the minivan? Anybody?
Some explosive thing that he was going to blow up something with.
Tannerite. Now, the Tannerite company goes out of business within 90 days of the event. Their main factory burns to the ground.
Wait, whose factory burned to the ground?
Tannerite. The Tannerite factory burned to the ground less than 90 days after the event, and they're out of business.
Wow. So Tannerite is a company, not an explosive?
Tannerite is both the name of the company and the explosive.
Huh. Well, so Robert B. is saying that 223 and 5.56 are interchangeable. He used M249 and M240 in his service, and that was no M240. I mean, I think he's focused on his point, but you're trying to build a hypothesis. Something I want everybody to kind of accept for a moment is that when we're not the FBI, we don't have the ability to go around questioning witnesses and subpoenaing evidence and pulling these things. We're looking through a keyhole here. So Robert B., I appreciate your service and I appreciate your insights.
And again, Robert,
we're working on a hypothesis.
Robert is saying, right, so what Robert is saying is that 223 and 5.56 are interchangeable. And what that means is I can put a 223 round into a 5.56 weapon and I can fire it. I think Robert's missing the point. The point is that the weapons in the room are 223 weapons. It doesn't mean that they're not interchangeable, but on the side of the gun, it has a caliber etched in it, and it says 223. That makes it a civilian weapon.
Right. And so you're saying if we were doing a Fast and Furious type thing, those guns would come from some military store. of guns, and
Right,
that
and they
would
would say
be
5.56. They would say 5.56 NATO. They would have 3-round burst groups or fully automatic fully automatic fire triggers on them. It wouldn't be semi-automatic
Well, wait a minute. See,
223
now
weapons. That's the
now
point.
Robert, I think, is
Right.
is on to what you're getting towards, which is that he has said something I knew nothing about. A lot of gun enthusiasts buy tannerite in bulk. So this is for people to just have a better picture, John, of how you and I and most of the guests on Crowdsource the Truth work. We generally have a phone conversation the day of the show where we sort of discuss what the general topic will be. And I tend to tell the guests not to tell me too much so that we can have this discovery during the show. But
That's right.
Robert B. has brought up something that I knew nothing about, which is a big focus of what we're going to be talking about in just about 15 minutes when we begin the sponsor exclusive show on patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com for both of those. So I think that Robert B. is very knowledgeable about guns, and we're going to learn some more about tannerite, at least I am. I do want to remind people who are watching us right now, if you're not yet subscribed to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, make your way over there and familiarize yourself with some of John's previous videos. We've also got a simulcast of the live stream happening there, so there's over 220 people chatting with us right now, and welcome to everybody who is over there. John, we're going to just wrap it up here in a few minutes. Do you have some final thoughts before we get into the deep dive on Subscribestar and Patreon?
Sure. Why don't we, since you're on YouTube, why don't you see if you can pull up a YouTube video of tannerite? Let's see if we can see tannerite in action so that people have a sense of what might Stephen Paddock have been doing with 100 pounds of tannerite in his minivan.
Right. And I didn't know anything about this. I've never owned a gun. I've only ever shot like whatever those things are you shoot a clay pigeon with. A 12-gauge shotgun is the only thing I've ever shot. So this looks like a dude who's getting ready to shoot something, the big boom. Now, we got to be careful not to run too much of his video here because he could strike it. What is it that they're going to do? They're going to blow something up with tannerite?
I imagine so. You picked the video.
Boom. There it looks like it. Okay, so they're just shooting things to get a big explosion is the purpose of tannerite.
Exactly. So now, and you maybe pull up another video. You know, again, this is the purpose here is we're critiquing this and using this for educational purposes to show people what is tannerite and how's it used. Let's pull up another tannerite video. Tannerite is how you spell it. You missing one N.
Sorry.
And then let's show another one, another example. See if you can find 164 pounds of tannerite.
Wow.
164
so is tannerite
pounds
used for any actual explosive like demolition, or is it just for shooting and having fun and blowing things up?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it's only used for shooting and blowing things up because in order for it to activate, you have to shoot it with something that's supersonic. So in other words, if you shot this with like a small pistol at 50 feet or something, it won't ignite. It has to be shot with a supersonic round. So it has to be traveling really quick. So they blow this barn up with 164 pounds, and that's what 164 pounds does. Now, Stephen Paddock has 100 pounds in the car, in the minivan. And so again, the question is, well, what was the intent? Was he necessarily selling these guns, or I'm going to put this out there and just let people think about it. And again, these are suppositions because of what you said a moment ago. We don't have access to all the evidence. We don't have access to all the body cameras. We haven't seen any body camera footage from the police going upstairs to the Four Seasons and vacating the Four Seasons. We've seen none of that footage, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, he has a minivan. He has 100 pounds of tannerite, and he has 24 guns. Ask anybody who lives in Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, New Mexico, anybody who lives in the South and the West, if you've got a minivan, 24 guns, and 100 pounds of tannerite, what are you planning to do? You're planning to go out, in this case in the desert, because it's Vegas, and go shoot some tannerite and blow some stuff up.
Fill up a jug with
And
this
that's what,
stuff and shoot it and have it explode or whatever.
yeah, exactly. You tape it to a
So this is not
watermelon and you
something that
blow the
you
watermelon
would,
up.
this is not a substance that you would plant in the hotel and then detonate and blow up the hotel or those
Oh,
tanks at the
whoa,
airport or
whoa,
anything.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, that all intend, that depends on your intent. If you were looking for explosive material to do, bad things with, this is commercially available and it blows up buildings, as you just saw.
It does.
So, it's like anything else. A gun in the right hands, a gun in the wrong hands, right?
Yeah.
Explosives in the right hands can be a lot of fun. Take them out to the desert, stick some in a, beat up old washing machine, and kaboom.
Right.
And that's how people use tannerite. So the question is, Stephen Paddock has a minivan, 24 guns, and 100 pounds of tannerite. To most people that are familiar with tannerite and weapons, it looks like he's getting ready to take some people out to the desert shooting. That's what it looks like. Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that's what's happened, but that's what it looks like. A minivan, 100 pounds of tannerite, 24 guns. What does Stephen think he's doing? Where does he think he's going? And why does he have 2 vehicles there?
Right. Okay, with that, we're going to have to wrap it up here because we're getting very, very close to our sponsor exclusive show. I do want to remind everybody that both John and I are on Subscribestar in addition to Patreon. So if people are looking for an alternative to Patreon, you can make your way over to subscribestar.com, look for I Am John Cullen, and subscribe to John on Subscribestar. Same thing with Crowdsource the Truth. If you're at subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth, you can become a sponsor on there. You're going to get access to all of the sponsor exclusive videos, and we'll begin in just about 7 minutes. So John, with that, we'll make a hasty departure here and head over to the sponsor exclusives where we'll get into some of this stuff, and I'm sure you'll share with us some of the answers.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jason.
And thanks
Thank you,
everybody
everybody.
for watching.